For most of this dive, the hammerheads were hidden just beyond what we could see, close enough to feel possible, but far enough that we had no control over what happened. I'm Don, and this is DiveWise. Today, we are diving Malpelo, a remote rock far off Colombia, where deep water, strong underwater current, and open ocean make it one of the world's great shark diving sites. This story is about waiting for the moment every diver comes to see a Malpelo, hoping to see a full hammerhead crossing. The real challenge is patience, because Malpelo, chasing the moment, is usually how you lose it. But first, let's talk about Malpelo. Malpelo is not a tropical island with beach resorts or easy shore dives. It is a steep, volcanic rock far offshore in the Colombian Pacific, surrounded by deep water, current, and open ocean. From the surface, it almost looks empty. Underwater, however, that isolation turns the island into a meeting point for open ocean life. In open ocean, a rock like Malpelo gives animals something to gather around. It's that oasis in the desert of the ocean. Current hits the structure. Fish hold near the wall. Small cleaning fish gather in certain spots like an underwater car wash for larger animals. And predators move through. That is why Malpelo is not just another dive site. It is a place where current, geography, and animal movement intersect. Scalloped hammerheads are known for forming large daytime schools around offshore islands and seamounts. So our goal was not to search randomly for sharks. Our goal was to place ourselves along a path they might already be using. The plan was simple, but not easy. Start beside the rock, use it as our reference point, and watch the blue water. If the timing looked right, we would cross the channel. That channel was the gamble. It was where the hammerheads might pass, but also where the dive became more exposed. Near the rock, we had a wall to orient ourselves. Once we left it, there was only open blue water around us, and the very group we were with became the thing we used to stay oriented along with our compasses. Not to mention, we had a great and experienced guide who's been to Malpelo and dived there thousands of times. As divers, we knew the best plan was to stay together as a group, trust each other, and let the encounter come to us. But as filmmakers, we still wanted the shot, and that was the tension of the dive. The dive started beside the rock exactly as planned. At first, there was no big reveal, just current moving across the structure, fish holding close to the wall, and all of us watching the edge of the blue. Then, the first hammerhead appeared as a faint shape in the distance. When it turned slightly, the wide head and tall dorsal fin gave it away immediately. That head is not just what makes hammerheads look unusual. It gives them a wider sensory field, helping them scan the water for movement and electrical signals from prey. Hammerheads have the unique ability to almost see everywhere around them, like a 360-degree camera. They have very little blind spots. That's pretty cool. But in just moments, a few sharks appeared after that. But they did not come as one clear school. They came in fragments. One would appear, fade out, then another would slip into view from a different angle. That is part of what makes diving with scalloped hammerheads so interesting, especially with juvenile scalloped hammerheads. During the day, they often gather around offshore islands and seamounts, but from the diver's view, you may only see pieces of the school as the water opens and closes. And a few larger sharks seem to show up first. And generally, while in the channel, a few larger hammerheads would show up first, just at the edge of the blue. These were full adults with mating scars. Then, the smaller juvenile hammerheads flickered behind them, appearing for a second before disappearing again. It felt less like a school had arrived and more like it was testing the water around us. I cannot say that is exactly what was happening biologically, but that was the feeling underwater. That those adults were scouting ahead and making sure it was safe to cross for the school of juvenile hammerheads. That's real, social, and interesting behavior. Ultimately, the larger sharks were probing ahead, and the smaller ones moved behind them, out of sight. It was definitely social, like the adults were testing the water and creating a safer path for the younger sharks behind them. Whether that was protection, caution, or simply the way the school moved together, it made the encounter feel more intelligent than random. And another cool thing about hammerheads is they're the most evolved shark. Of all the sharks, a lot of them are very ancient. They've been around for a very long time. Hammerheads are some of the newest species, and they've evolved much more modern and sophisticated for the modern times in the ocean. But here we were, seeing those sharks zoom in out of view. That's where the impatience started creeping in. They were close enough to make you want more, but far enough that the camera never quite captured the full scene. Maybe if I could move a little closer, I could get a shot. Maybe if I kicked a little harder, I could close the gap. But the hammerheads are not animals you force the encounter with. They are cautious, and your behavior changes the dive. If you chase them, you usually lose. They're much faster than you. You burn your breathing gas, separate from the group, make the animals less comfortable, and still not getting the shot you want. So we stayed together and we waited. Then our guide checked the group and signaled us into the channel. That was the moment the dive changed. You see, when the hammerheads commit to a crossing, the adults move and the children follow. So once they have decided to commit, you will have a crossing right before your eyes, and that is the time to go and get your shot. Go too soon, they get chased away. Get it just right, and you'll find yourself in the middle of a school of hammerheads. And we saw our window. The timing looked right. We were crossing the channel toward the main island, suspended in open blue water, hoping our timing matched the hammerheads' route. For the first few moments, nothing happened. We had committed to moving towards them, but there was still no guarantee they wouldn't be chased off. Then, the first line of hammerheads came right behind some of the adults, out of the haze, and crossed right in front of us, steady and calm, as if they were moving along a road only they could see. More followed behind them, and suddenly the entire column had motion. Hammerheads passed above us, below us, and ahead of us, being surrounded, as far as the eye can see, by hammerheads. That's an amazing feeling. Some were visible for only a second before the water swallowed them again. Others held their shape just long enough for the head, dorsal fin, body, and slow movement of the tail to register. That is when the school finally made sense. The fragments we seen earlier were pieces of a much larger movement, and here we are in the middle of it. It felt less like watching individual animals and more like being inside the path of the school. And for a few seconds, I even stopped recording. I stopped trying to capture everything and just watched in awe. That was the best decision I made on the dive. And if you're enjoying this video, now is a great time to like and subscribe. This channel is all about scuba stories, dive adventures, and underwater encounters that bring you closer to the ocean. But ultimately, the moment started to pass, the shapes started to fade, and the water that had been full of sharks became blue again. It is strange to think of how far we had traveled for something that lasted only for a few seconds. Malpelo sits about 500 kilometers or 310 miles off Colombia's Pacific coast, so getting there means a long open ocean crossing by liveaboard. After all that distance, all that waiting, and all that planning, you drop beside this lonely rock, hoping the ocean gives you a window. And in the end, that tiny window was enough. That is what made the hammerhead crossing feel so powerful. It was not the constant action. It was anticipation, timing, and then a brief moment where everything lined up. Those are the moments that stick with you forever. But Malpelo was not only about the hammerheads. Even in the shallows, the island felt alive in a strange way, a rugged way. The rocks were covered with coral and barnacles. That's very interesting. Fish and textures that made the whole place feel less like a bare rock and more like a living ocean fortress. That contrast stayed with me. Above the surface, Malpelo looks harsh and almost empty, like an island that nobody would want. Underwater, every ledge, crack, and current line seemed to have life attached to it. After the crossing, we hit the main island and ended in the reef and barnacles. We watched our death, our breathing gas, and stayed with the group and followed the plan. On the surface, the feeling was not just excitement, it was gratitude. We had come all this way for a chance to see hammerheads in one of the wildest places they still gather. And for a few seconds, we were exactly where we needed to be. That is what I will remember most. Not just the sharks, but the distance, the waiting, the uncertainty, the memories we shared with our friends, and the feeling that Malpelo gave us just enough. Malpelo is the kind of place that stays with you long after the dive is over. Not because the ocean gave us everything, but because it gave us just enough. The more you know, the more you'll love and protect the ocean. Until next time.